as always, I talk a lot about Hinduism and Buddhism. Those are my specialties, in Taoism, the three things that I really enjoy and have kind of my whole life have been a big passion of mine. But nothing that will be nothing that will be really abstract at all, and very explainable. And if you don't understand something, please interrupt me right away. Okay, so let's get started here. So starting out with a picture of a comet over Stonehenge. And the reason why I'm putting that there is, do people know why a comet or any comet is showing up in the sky? Does it have some special glowing feature about it?
Coming through the atmosphere.
No.
No?
It's outside Earth's atmosphere. Meteors are coming through the atmosphere.
It's because the sun is shining on it, and then we could see that.
Very good, Sue.
Over.
Exactly. So, but here's the point. And so we say, yeah, the sun's shining on it. But the thing is that it's in space, right? The sun is shining on space everywhere. It's the whole space is illuminated by the sun's rays. It's just that it only takes an object going through it to see the sun, but the sun's rays are there the whole time. They're always there. That presence is always there. And I find this to be a very good metaphor for sort of more spiritual aspects of things. We take for granted the concrete physical things we see, but we are in an atmosphere of spirituality, just like the aura of the sun. We are in effect part of the sun. This planet wouldn't be here without the sun. We are part of its atmosphere. So likewise, we can think of it sort of spiritual, or spiritual essence, just like the sun. In a similar way to thinking about a movie projector, if we don't, the light is there, but we don't think about the light, like, you did the thing where you put the shadows in front of the thing, whatever. But the light is there. When the movie gets turned on, we don't think of the light anymore. We think of what's being projected on the screen. But the light is the reason why it's there in the first place. So just to kind of give you an idea of the fact that there's something beyond what you're seeing here. And it's actually enormous. And actually what we are seeing here and what we are is very partial to the totality of reality as it truly is. And this is very essential when we're talking about meditation and such. Here's a poem from the Saikontan, which is a very famous Japanese series of poems. At the sound of the bell in the silent night, I wake from my dream in this dream world of ours, gazing at the reflection of the moon in a clear pool. I see beyond my form, my real form. And I had that in the title and in our blurb. And it's to see what is the poet talking about there? Gazing at the reflection of the moon in a pond, seeing the form beyond the real form, and thinking about the reflection of the moon. It's not the moon, but there it is. You see the moon clearly there, but it's clearly just a reflection. In much the same way, much of what we see in this world is a reflection of something very deep and very profound and subtle. Gayatri Mantra, this is in honor of Cass, who's learning Gayatri Mantra. And it's kind of the most beloved, I would say it's the most beloved mantra in all of, in India, in Hinduism, from the Rig Veda. Om Bhurvubha Suvaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat. And it means we meditate on the glory of that being that has produced this universe. May she enlighten our minds. And I wanted to just real quickly run through this because this is the difference between English and Sanskrit. When you see the beauty of Sanskrit and the essence of the words, and if you don't care about Sanskrit, then you know that you can probably go get a sandwich or something. But for those who do care about it, like me, who are passionate about it, who are crazy about it, I find there's so much richness in the language. For example, saboteur. It's usually just translated as some kind of amorphous god or goddess, but it actually comes from Savitri, which means that which gives birth, or like the power in the sun itself. So it's a very powerful thing. If you understand the essence of that, just that one word alone, I mean, it has such a mystical, powerful thing. And the idea of that which gives birth is what we're going to be talking about, is how does anything in our manifested reality come into existence? The secret doctrine talks at the very beginning about how manifestation occurs from unmanifested. And so, but this is going on. We are continuously creating a world all the time. So this idea that when we are meditating on the glory of the being that's produced the universe, we are actually calling that universe into existence right now, as we do this mantra. So thinking of this, and you can see the different words here. Maybe I won't go through the whole thing. It would take a while. But to be aware of this, and maybe if you're interested in Gayatri Mantra, I know Sue, you know it, and Mark knows it, that you can check out the words, because the words are pretty cool in themselves and mean a lot more than is normally translated. Yeah.
There's another mantra that I'm thinking of, and I'm wondering if it has some relation to it.
Which one?
Mantra is Om Namaha Shivaya
Om Namah Shivaya.
Shiva Yaham. Yeah.
Yeah, because Om Namah Shivaya, definitely. I don't know if I know that one.
Okay.
So Ansel's talking about another mantra. For some reason, he wants to be in the other room and not be in our group here. So. It's okay. You can come on in.
Some people might be sensitive to like the chewing noise. I don't want to.
Well, I'm not, and I'm sitting next to you, so you're fine.
Sensitive to tasty smelling food, maybe.
It smells like an Indian restaurant in here. So,
Thai.
so anyway, yeah, I mean, these mantras that are typically praising various gods or goddesses. In the case you're mentioning Shiva, you know, so it could be anyone. It's just connecting.
But it's using like the inner.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that in Hindu, in sort of the Hindu mindset, there's an idea that we're all connected to all these gods and goddesses. So it's not like you're worshiping somebody out there. You know, it's our own inner sense, and that's exactly as this one here as well. So, oh yeah, that's right. So there's my talk in essence. You can pretty much, anything I say will be superfluous to that essence right there. And in the interest of time, what would be appropriate would be to spend about half an hour just looking at that beautiful form. But there's this, just to say that there's sort of a grace and a sort of a otherworldliness about somebody that's in a place that's beyond description, beyond words, beyond thought. And that's what we'll be talking about. So that basically the place where she is, which is definitely some celestial area, some celestial realm. From Rilke, I live my life in widening circles that reach across the world. I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. I circle around God, around the primordial tower. I've been circling for thousands of years, and I still don't know. Am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song? We're going to be asking this question a lot today. So I'm going to run through this. It's four little things from Alan Watts. So you don't have to even read this at all. You can just listen if you'd like. But I think this is nicely kind of captures where I'm going with this talk. So this is titled Disturbing Confusions of the Mind. This is just snatched out of some, Alan Watts' brilliance, that just snatched out of the way he would just talk, which is one of a kind. When you are perfectly free to feel stuck or not stuck, then you are unstuck. Because actually nothing can stick on the real mind. And you will find this out if you watch the flow of your thoughts. There is an expression in Chinese which means the flow of thoughts, or what we call in literary criticism, the stream of consciousness. And they put the character for thought 3 times, which in Chinese sounds like nien, nien, nien. You will notice that thought follows thought, follows thought when you're just ruminating. And those thoughts arise and go like waves on the water. All the time they come and go. And when they go, they're as if they had never been here. So actually this shows that your mind doesn't stick, really. You can get the illusion of it sticking by, for example, cycling through the same succession of thoughts over and over again. And that gives a sense of permanence. In the same way as when you revolve a cigarette around in the dark, you get the illusion of a circle, a solid circle, although there's only a single point of fire. And it is from this connecting of thoughts that we get the sensation that behind our thoughts, there is a thinker who controls them and experiences them. Although the notion that there is a thinker is just one member in the stream of thoughts. For example, if you get a certain kind of rhythm that goes diggity diggity boop, diggity diggity boop, diggity diggity boop, the boop is part of the rhythm, but it can also be used as a cue. So you get in relation to the diggity diggity boop, you get thought, thought, thinker, thought, thought, thinker, thought, thought, thinker. And if this happens regularly enough and long enough, you get the illusion that there is someone who thinks apart from the stream of thoughts that come and go, the stream of experiences. And we use such absurd phrases, not only thinking our thoughts, but feeling our feelings, seeing sights, and hearing sounds. And you must understand that it is perfectly obvious that seeing a sight is seeing, that hearing a sound is hearing, feeling a feeling is feeling. And so in the same way, thinking a thought is thinking. But you get split-minded, you see. So you get I and me, and the I who ought to or must control me as a sensation of some entity that stands aside from thoughts and chooses among them, controls them, regulates them, and so on. Actually, this is a way to have one's thoughts not controlled. The more there is this duality of the separate thinker standing aside from the thoughts, the separate feeler watching or feeling the feelings, the more the stream of feelings is coaxed into a self-protective activity, into getting more and more and more like a stuck record. The purposes of which are to protect and aggrandize and to enlarge the status of the supposed thinker. So behind all of this is the time and true question of who are you? I've heard this at many, many talks. It's sort of an annoying question, but it's one that is relevant to anybody that comes into this room, because hopefully you're asking yourself that question. Hopefully you don't think you have the answer, because if you think you have the answer, you don't, because that would just be a thought. In other words, something that was told to you, something that you've learned, you've been trained to think, to identify with. And there's so much questioning of this right now. But I've noticed the millennials and people younger, even my grandkids who are now in their teens, questioning these definitions and these prescribing certain labels as no, you know, they don't know exactly what it is, but they know what it isn't. And what it is the things that we've been putting on them, which were put onto us, which were put on to the people who put that onto us. So I'm going back into infinity, into the beginning of humans. So we're going to be asking this question and talking about this. Who are you? So be thinking about that, and it's probably apparent to those of you who have gone through this rigmarole before that it's not the answer that you think it is. Who you are is not what you think. Right? Or wrong? I don't know. Maybe it is.
I asked myself this morning.
That's a great answer. Mike didn't know. So this is from Descartes. I suppose that all the objects, presentations that had ever entered into my mind when awake had in them no more truth than the illusions of my dreams. But immediately upon this, I observed that, whilst I wished to think that all was false, it was absolutely necessary that I, who thus thought, should be something. And I observed this truth. I think, therefore I am. I concluded that I might, without scruple, accept it as the first principle of philosophy, of which I was in search. This proposition, I am, I exist, whenever it is uttered by me or conceived by the mind, necessarily is true. That makes sense to everybody? Everybody agree with that, right?
I do.
Everybody agrees with that. So, that's no, well.
I'm reminded of when I was taking philosophy in college, and told a story by the professor that one of the as part of the final, for extra credit, there was the prove that you exist. It was an extra credit question, and the professor's favorite answer was, "I pay tuition, therefore I am," which I thought was actually pretty interesting, because it's like, well, functionally, whether or not I am or not to you as a person, it's not self-discovery, it's what I think is the relevant truth to you.
Exactly.
Is that if I pay tuition, then I exist.
No, Dane, that's a really good point. What's the relevant truth?
Yeah.
What's the relevant truth here? And so in essence, what Descartes is saying, the relevant truth is that I think, therefore I am. And we're going to question that a little bit, but we'll move on for now. Einstein said, information is not knowledge. Shocker, right? Nowadays, we have information, we're bombarded with information. But Einstein said this long before the internet. The only source of knowledge is experience. You need experience to gain wisdom. In other words, you can read all the books you want, you can go to all the gurus, whatever. That's wisdom. It requires experience. So I love this one from Mark Twain. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Mariana's a Mark Twain fan. Krishnamurti, if I do not know reality, the unknown, how can I search for it? We'd stop right there. So if I do not know reality, the unknown, then how can I search for it? So this is a big question. And I think that typically people think that they're going to find it when they come in here. They read the books, they do their astrology charts, they do, tarot readings, they do whatever it is, and they're gonna definitely know it for sure. But he goes on to say, surely it must come, but I cannot go after it. In other words, you cannot search for the truth. Yeah, no worries. Okay. Surely it must come, but I cannot go after it. If I go after it, I am going after something which is known, projected by me, by my own mind. So it just kind of like, as Bruce would say, stick a pin in this thought, because the idea is, okay, if you're not projecting it from your own mind, then how in the world are you going to be able to find these things out? But if you do project from your mind, you're just basically making a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're just saying the thing that you already know. So you're clearly not finding anything unknown. You're finding something that's already in your memory. Yes, Bill.
Excuse me, Andrew. I'm thinking about this. The first sentence presupposes that one does not know reality, or presupposes that it's the unknown. I'm not sure if I could accept that. It's assuming that reality is the unknown.
Or
Yeah.
only the unknown. There's that another corruption there.
Yeah, so as I say, stick a pin in this to follow Bruce's thing.
Well, Andrew,
To see if I'm not going to try to prove it or disprove it right now.
isn't it kind of like the Oxfording pictures?
Is it what?
Isn't it a little bit like the Oxfording pictures? Where he's chasing the ox.
Oh, yeah. Well, but see, he's actually, he knows that he doesn't know. And that Bill's saying that Bill's saying he thinks he already knows. So that's a different story. So if you know that you don't know, you're in a different position than if you think you already know. So that's what we're working through. And there's no set answer. This is just to kind of stimulate your perspectives on things, just to show different perspectives on this. And there's going to be a lot of information here, Bill. So we'll come back to your question again. Right. So Edmund says the knowledge is always going to be partial if you start from what's known. So that's a good point. So I really pushed right over here. Okay, Stephen Hawking. The greatest obstacle to knowledge is not ignorance, but the illusion of knowledge. Ouch, Bill.
That's what Mark Twain said.
That's right. So what's this picture doing here? How did that get here? So this is the story of the turtle and the fish. Buddha told this story. So one day, the turtle came back to the pond where his friends, the fish, were. He had been out walking around the countryside and came back into the pond. And so the fish said, "Oh, Mr. Turtle, where have you been?" And the turtle said, "Well, I've been out walking around out on the land." And the fish said, "What on the land? What's that? We don't know of anything called the land." And they said, is it wet? And he said, "No, it's not wet." Is it cool and refreshing? No, it's just land. Is it hard? Is it soft and smooth on the skin? He said, "No, it's hard." Is it does the light shine through it? No light shines through it. And they kept asking him questions, and he kept saying, "No, it's not that." And so the fish finally said, "Well, Mr. Turtle, this place cannot exist. What you're saying is you're having an illusion. You're having a fantasy. This does not in reality exist. And Mr. Turtle said, well, maybe so. Then he left and went back to walk on land again. So this is sort of a little parable about how we view what's real and not real. Does everybody know what the flatland thing, mathematics? You know. Okay. So flatland was developed in the 1900s to illustrate how there can be a dimension of reality that we do not perceive. If in flatland everything is a two-dimensional plane, there's no three dimensions. So in a two-dimensional plane, you'd have, like say a piece of paper, and then what the flatlander would see would only be what would appear in two dimensions. So for example, you would put a pencil through flatland, the flatlander would only see the circle where the pencil is, but the whole pencil would be on either side of the plane the flatland was in. And this is sort of illustrating the same thing, that for the fish, there's no conception of dry land. They've never ever seen that. Mr. Romulus would probably talk about Plato and his cave. It's a similar type of thing. If you haven't experienced something, then it's very difficult for you to understand it. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. This is all we're saying. Okay, here's another one of our lovely ladies to sort of illustrate, to say it much better than anything I'm going to talk about here. This is a different aspect of the first person, first individual goddess that we saw. So talk a little bit about, this is from the Yoga Sutras, and this is the famous second sutra in the Yoga Sutras, Yogashtiti Chitta Vritti Nirodha. And so I will go on to the next slide because it goes through what each of these is. So yoga, everybody knows what yoga is, right? Yoga is union, essentially union with the divine. But it might be union with reality, it might be union with God, it might be union with a lot of different things. But the idea is it's something beyond, our kind of where we are now, a more divine aspect of our self, of our real self. Maybe union with our real self would be a good way to put it. Chitta is the mind field. Translate often as mind, but it's sort of more vast than mind as we normally think of it. Vritti is the fluctuations, the currents, or the ups and downs, which typically take the form of thoughts. We'll talk about vrittis a little bit. What I wanted to get at here is that we take the mind and its doings for granted. So let's look a little bit at this from the Hindu point of view, from the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali point of view, which is like thousands of years old. So they've been thinking about this for a long time. We haven't been thinking about it at all. So, psychotherapy and all that is just recent, within 100 years or 200 years, maybe. This is thousands of years old tradition. So there's a lot of regarding has gone into this. And then Nirodha, the last word, is the crucial one. And that is the one that's difficult to control, difficult to define, because control is one word that's usually used, but control means that the mind is controlling the mind, and that's clearly not going to work. So there's an idea of, I like more the idea of stilling or quieting, allowing it to settle on its own. And so there's 5 modifications of mind in the Yoga Sutras, 5 vrittis. The first one is pramana, and that is correct understanding, or pramana rather, is correct understanding. In other words, you've correctly understood the situation as it is. And then there's viparaya, and that is not misperceiving the idea. You see something, but you had it wrong. The famous example is the rope and the snake, that you're walking along and you see a rope on the ground, but you think it's a snake and you jump back. It's a misperception. It actually is a rope that you thought was a snake. Then imagination, vikalpa, which is huge, I mean, it's all fiction, all of, most movies, and anything you think of, all culture, so much of dance or whatever, all evolves around imagination. And in the Hindu conception, this isn't imagine's kind of put down in Western culture, but imagination is kind of the doorway to amazing wonders. So but it needs to be regarded as something that might not be specifically correct understanding or misperception. It's another form of the way the mind works. And then nidra, what happens when we sleep, our mind is still there, right? It's not just, didn't just disappear. It's doing something, but it's in this modification of vritti. And then the last one is memory, and that's the bulk of what we know is memory. I mean, there's hardly anything that's not that, right? I mean, everything we think about is called from memory. In our present moment, anything we think about the world, anything there, it's called from memory. So to see how in yoga, it's broken down, the mind is not just thought. It's much more subtle than that. It becomes there's much more variation. So it becomes more precise.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So chitta vritti,
Nirodha.
nirodha is quieting the mind.
Allowing the currents to settle. Yeah.
It's quieting all five aspects.
These are all vrittis.
Hey, Andrew, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How would you compare this to the aggregates?
Oh, okay, it's coming up. Good question. See, that's what happens when you have smart people in a room. That's very good. No, yeah, hang on, just a sec. We're getting there. Very good question. Here, Ansel asked how this equates with the aggregates. There's 5 of those as well. So, what's that?
How come this memory, mind, sleep, sleep can be like a state of mind, state of the mind, right?
Well, yeah, these are all states of the mind. These are all states of mind, right?
Yeah, because memory is information.
Is what? Well, okay, so just looking at it from an analytical point of view, this is just one way. I mean, you might want to put it in a separate category, but it's actually a fluctuation of the mind. Whenever we're recalling a memory, our mind is fluctuating. Something's happening in the mind, right? Anytime we think about a memory, call a memory, we tell a story from the past, whatever, that's mental activity is going on there. Right? That's all they're saying. Good question.
I have a question about this as well. What about dream states, which seems to be
Yeah, I think the
a
dreams.
topic that it seems to be partially processing memory.
It is.
And also you for the most part get it while in a sleep state.
Right.
So does this tradition consider dreams and dream state to be something completely separate from these 5 things, or something that straddles?
It's a great question. I remember going into that when we were studying this, and I can't remember where it sort of straddles, and they definitely recognize swapna as a particular aspect of that's a very important aspect of, so they're not ignoring it. Let's put it that way. I don't know if it's an imagination or sleep. It seems like it would be somewhere in there.
Maybe not considered a modification or something.
Well, no, I think it would be. I'm not sure. I'll find out next time I see you. I'll tell you. I can't recall offhand how that falls. It's a good question. Okay, so there's 3 ways we can know something. The first way is direct perception, pratyaksha. The second way is anuman, which is inference, and the third way is scriptural authority, agama. And scriptural authority then would include all books. Anytime anybody tells you something, pretty much anything you hear or receive from the outside. Inference is what you would deduce from some partial observation of something, and direct perception is actually seeing the thing. And the example that's given is a fire. And so you can actually see, like say a house is on fire. You see the house on fire, you see the flames coming up. The inference one would be you hear a fire engine, or you see smoke coming up, or something that's like a clue that there's the house is on fire. And then the third one would be you read about it in the newspaper the next day, or hear it on the radio or whatever. Somebody tells you, hey, there's a fire over there. So this might sound like, yeah, okay, whatever, but it's actually really good for us to realize how little of our actual knowledge comes from direct perception. Virtually none of it, honestly. So unless we're completely in the moment we're there perceiving something. Otherwise, we're either hearing about it, or we're kind of thinking about it, and we're kind of daydreaming about it. We think about, whatever, something happened in the past, whatever. So just to get at the fact that direct perception is really a crucial factor in really knowing something. And yet we rarely rely on it. And it's encouraged in these traditions to do that, not to just read books and not to just listen to other people and kind of get their ideas about something, but to actually experience these things. So just wanted to give you that little frame of reference. So the Shiva Sutras, which I'm currently studying, this is from Kashmiri Shaivism. It's another tradition, vast tradition. And this is just, I'm just in passing kind of mention this because I found this particular, again, number 2, the second sutra. So that this is like, they give the introduction, or they bow to the guru or whatever, and then they jump right into this. In the Yoga Sutras, it's Chitta Vritti Nirodha. The yoga is the stilling of the mind. This one, knowledge is bondage. Jnanam bandhaha. So what? Knowledge is bondage? What do you mean? How can that be? What they're saying here is that knowledge, knowing, becoming acquainted with something, having something already established in the mind is a way of connecting ourselves to the world, to our memory, to things we've learned, all these sorts of things. It prevents us from being able to be open in the present moment, where the actual direct perception is available. So the idea is limited knowledge. In other words, or partial knowledge, as Edmund brought up earlier. If we're going for knowledge of reality, that means we don't want partial knowledge. We want knowledge of the full reality, and the full reality should be able to present itself, but we don't want to block it by having a bunch of stuff already in our mind. It's like the Zen story about the monk who's invited to the emperor, and the emperor says, he's been studying all of these different philosophies, and he brought the monk in to kind of test his knowledge and all that sort of thing. And the monk said, oh, that's really interesting. The emperor's just going on and on about all the stuff he knows. And the monk says, well, why don't we have some tea? And so the emperor said, well, sure, okay, yeah, sure. And so brings the teacup, and then the monk starts pouring the tea, and he's pouring and pouring and pouring, and the tea goes up to the top, and then it starts flowing over the side. And he's just pouring away like that, smiling, like, and the emperor's going, what are you doing? What are you doing? The cup's overflowing already. And he says, it's just like your mind. Your mind is already overflowing with it. How can I pour any tea into it? So it's the same sort of thing, that we need to respect our own minds, our own ability to learn. And so the way that we do that is by staying more empty than full, not filling ourselves full of all kinds of stuff that's just going to get in the way. Anybody know the story? Probably everybody knows this story. I just like it anyway. The great Sufi master Mullah Nasruddin was on his hands and knees searching for something under a street lamp. His friend Mansour saw him and asked, what are you looking for? My house key, Nasruddin replied. I lost it. Mansour joined him after looking for the key, and after a period of fruitless searching, he asked, are you sure you lost it around here? Nasruddin replied, oh, I didn't lose it around here. I lost it over there by my house. Then why, Mansoor asked, are you looking for it over here? Because, Nasruddin said, because the light is better. Is that apparent to everybody? This is what we do. One of my activities in life is trying to find things that I've lost. So it's kind of one of my main preoccupations throughout the day. But we often will look for things where they aren't, just because the light is better. Everybody's talking about it. This is the latest thing. There's all these reasons why we think this is more interesting to look at it here, but maybe it's not there. Maybe it's in some place. Yeah, and maybe we actually know where it is, but we're looking over here because everybody else is looking here. I don't know. There's all kinds of things. The more I explain it, the worse it gets. But just the idea that, think about this image of looking for something where it isn't, but just being there because that's where the light is. Okay, so you asked about the 5 skandhas, right? So this is from Buddhism now, and so these are the 5 aspects of I think they're saying the cognitive perceptual process, which is probably a good description of saying anything. It's hard to translate a lot of this stuff into English, but essentially what these are the 5 ways that keep us stuck to this world and keep us investigating this world. And they are feeling, sensation, conceptual formations or thinking, volitional energy, will, whatever we think we want to do, and then vijnana, which is consciousness itself. So these 5, they pretty much make up how we perceive the world around us with beyond the senses. So we have the sensation, Vedana, but sensation is making the contact with the world. We see something, we have a feeling about it, samya, and it creates some kind of a reaction in us. That may stimulate us to do something about that thing. We may want it, we want to grasp it, or we may not like it. It's an alligator coming at us, whatever. So it creates some sort of energy, and then we have the thinking about it. We make the form. Rupa means form in Sanskrit, but in this case, it means a thought that becomes an actual conceptual form. It becomes almost solid, just as in Theosophy they say thoughts are things. It becomes something solid, and so the thought is almost tangible in that sense. Then vijnana in the middle is consciousness. That's just kind of knowing, how we cognize the world around us in sort of a bare sense, without any coloring whatsoever, just bare consciousness. So I just wanted to another way to kind of think about thinking, think about the way we perceive the world around us. And none of these are 100% true. None of them are 100% false, but they're just different views than maybe what you've been aware of in the past.
Okay, another question.
Yeah.
If that's okay to ask. Why people are differentiating between those states of mind in the first place?
Can you be a little clearer?
Well, we say mind.
Mhm.
Okay, so why do we say there are 5 states of mind? Instead of just saying, okay, whatever is happening there is happening. I mean,
In
why
other
do
words,
we have to
why do
compartmentalize?
these Buddhists want to break everything up when it's just thinking? It's all thinking. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's not just thinking. Well, yeah, I guess
Or just perceiving? Or
I guess that's what I'm asking. Why do they want to compartmentalize?
Right.
Why do we want to put things in boxes?
So that would be, it's a fabulous question. I mean, it shows that you're, aware of stuff. It is unfortunately a big topic in Buddhism. Actually, I've done talks on the Wheel of Life, some pratita samuppada. And we would have to get into a whole thing about basically the Four Noble Truths, which have to do with that suffering is caused by what we desire, and that we can get away from that desire by lack of being attached to things. But we have to know how that mechanism works in the first place before we can start addressing. And so this is an analytical approach to the mind and the way it works. And so it's a great question, and maybe the next talk is on the wheel of life. I don't know. So
This insight on this analysis,
Yeah.
how was done when, what was that?
what's that?
How was it when did they come up with these definitions that were just shown previous slide?
I'm sorry.
When was this done? When did they come up with all of this?
Oh, long time ago. This originated from the Buddha, but then it was probably elaborated by people after his time, in the succeeding. I mean, he's like 2,500. So maybe, in the years after that.
And since then, after that, are there any more detailed breakdown or more knowledge?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Tons and tons of stuff. It's very, I mean, Tibetan Buddhism alone, there's just stacks and stacks of, different discourses and stuff. Yeah. Very analytical. Buddhism is 100% analytical. It's like really looking at, I mean, 100%, but it emphasizes analytical. It's like really questioning things. The Buddha said, don't believe anything. Question. Ask why. Who am I? Back to our original question.
To some degree, I feel like some of this, we talk a lot about ancient philosophies or spiritual belief systems, but some of this comes down to way before that, when we were all sitting around a fire, and one of the two people around the fire was very quiet for a long time,
Mhm.
and the other one says, "What's going on?" You're like, "Well, I'm having things going on up here, considering things."
Yeah.
Oh, well, what, we decided the other day that's called thinking. Like, well, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about the thinking that happens when you're sleeping? No, not that. What are you thinking about? Well, I'm thinking about how I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to understand this other thing. So I think a lot of these terms end up existing just so that we can share an experience. And then I think later on, when we start trying to self-develop, we start having those types of fireside conversations within our own heads. But I think it's as just a tool to be understood by one another and to understand yourself. You end up trying to come up with terms just to differentiate one state that you're experiencing from another state that you're experiencing. And it's like this constant push and pull of trying to give names to something, and then forever trying to clarify the misunderstandings from either not sharing the same definitions, or your definition doesn't include other things that are, so you got to have to create new categories. So maybe the 5, we see 2 examples now that you use 5 things. 5 seems like a good number to break things up into, but I don't think they're purposely trying to just pick 5. I think that, as they were, like when I was looking at that last set, I'm thinking, can I think of any other states that are outside of that? And there may be, but just conversationally, that breaks it up into ways, into types of thinking that I can explain myself to someone else. And maybe that's before even the Buddha came along to share wisdom. You just had people sharing their experience, and they used language to try to give the nuance of what their experience was, since you're not in my head and I'm trying to explain it.
Right.
And I get some, and I might try something and go, yes, that happens to me. I also have that kind of thinking that's separate from the other types of thinking we do. And I don't know what to do with that thought either. But I think sometimes that I get hung up on definitions a lot, but they're functional. Like us having the same, meaning the same thing when we say thought, or if we say intuition. Us all thinking that word means the same thing is functional if we're trying to talk about.
So it's communication.
I think a lot of it comes down to communication. There was someone that once said that they thought that communication, the speaking in humans, was developed primarily the first time we wanted to deceive another person about something, because you had to be able to tell a story about that. I always thought that was a little pessimistic, but but the whole idea that you're trying to share a concept with another person, and you know, and then immediately you start finding things.
I think you're right, Dane, and I think that's a good point. Here, from the purposes of this, it's more, what do you think personally? And just working through it, you know, whether the rest of the room agrees or not, it doesn't really matter. It's how does this work for you? I have a question for folks on Zoom, Mark, or either Mark or can you hear okay when Dane was talking? Could you hear that?
Yes,
It was very audible.
yes.
Yes, I
Okay,
can
great.
hear it.
That's right, it's very odd.
Yeah,
This is-
no, that's
this is
good though.
Mar- This
because
is Mark. I was having trouble hearing it.
Were you okay? Yeah.
Same
'cause
with
you
me.
did- Yeah, you'd
Same.
given me that feedback before, so that's good to know. So we'll try to be mindful of that. And Jack had talked about, you were talking about the people sitting around the campfire, and Jack had brought up the idea of the origins of consciousness and the breakdown of the bicameral mind. That at one point, perhaps humans were actually, there was a corpus callosum which was connected, and we were actually hearing voices, and everybody was hearing these same voices in their minds. And this is how this mythology and stuff started back before the corpus callosum broke down, right, Jack?
Yeah, certainly. And there's also, I mean, there's also so many other creatures that communicate besides humans, and I don't think they're communicating to deceive one another.
That's excellent. Okay, very good. So now we're going to go on to really what I consider to be the main crux of what I'm going to be talking about. And this is this is in the Taittiriya Upanishad, describes this at great length. And I actually had the whole thing. I was practically going to do the whole talk on this. And I thought, my God, you guys will be asleep in no time. So I decided to spare you that. And so I'm going to give you the graphic, the illustrated version of this. And that is the 5 sheets. So the 5 koshas. I think of them as
Andrew?
the 5. Yes.
Andrew, sorry,
Yeah.
I have a point on our perceptions and
Yes.
how real they may be.
Mhm.
I've always considered that one test of whether our perceptions are real is how well we engage with the world. So if what we perceive, at least in our dimension of existence, reflects the reality, we will engage with the world fairly well. And to the extent that we don't perceive reality, we will have difficulties. And at the extreme, unfortunately, you have, say, schizophrenia, where what people perceive is basically not real, and they essentially have difficulty existing. That's just a test that I've considered.
Yeah, that's good. There's a lot of truth in that. I could also find some things to discuss there as well. I'm going to kind of move along just because I want to get to the main points, and then that's certainly that would be a good thing to pick up when we get our discussion in 5 minutes. Let's see. So anyway, 5 sheets. So this is based on this goes back to one of the Upanishads, very old, very ancient, the idea that we're not just a physical body. That actually, in essence, we're 5 streams of energy, and of which the physical body is one. And before we get into the slides, I'm going to say the physical body is a stream of food. Does everybody agree with that? Does that make sense? Is there any part of our physical body that's not food, water, air? It's all a stream of food. It's constantly changing. We were talking, Loki and I were talking earlier. Every 7 years, it completely changes. So it's like a living stream. It seems very solid, but it's actually changing, actually rather rapidly, particularly in larger timescales.
Well, I'm sorry, what's the last word you're saying? Stream of
Food.
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 FOOD. So you could take exception with that if you want, but it's going to be a little hard to.
I'm waiting to hear what comes next.
So if there's something that is of your body was not put through your mouth, then I don't know how that would be. But anyway, so and even if there is an exception, the main point is that, and this is the way they called it thousands of years ago, Annamaya Kosha. So we'll look at this. This is one, we're going to have 3 different ways of looking at this because it's pretty hard to grasp right away. This is a real nice, simple graphic that shows Annamaya Kosha is the physical body. So think of, everything that we know, and for that matter, the physical world, everything around us, trees, mountains, animals, other humans, everything that we can perceive as physical, everything that science would measure is physical. So that is the really perceptible stream of food, as they call it, Anna meaning food. So I don't know much more to say about it than that. That is really pretty obvious. It'd be hard to argue with the fact that we have a physical body. Then beyond that, it's said, and there's different schemes of this. And actually, Theosophy has one that has 7 levels. There's others that have 3. It doesn't really matter too much about the levels. The idea is to get you thinking that there are different levels of energy besides our bodies, or however you want to put it. In this philosophy, they call it sheaths. Sheath, like you're putting something inside of a sleeve, and you put something inside of a sleeve like that. We'll see an example of that coming up. So beyond that, then there's the pranamaya kosha, the life force. We talk about chakras and all that, and the energy moving in that way, or auras. This is sort of connected with the physical body, but not the physical body per se. Subtle energy that exists in conjunction with the physical body. And then the next one is the one we've been looking at a lot so far. That's the manomaya kosha, which is the mind, our thoughts and so forth. Everything that we, anyway, okay, you can see it there. So thoughts, desires, it's very important. Everything that we kind of think of in the world is there. Then beyond, in feelings, desires, thoughts, anything that we kind of split these things up a lot more. That all happens in Manomaya. And then in Vijnanamaya kosha is level that is in Theosophy and in Hinduism, they talk about buddhi or intuition. I would say beyond that, this intelligence, it's the same intelligence that guides a flower to open up, or if you watch a susurration of birds where you've got hundreds of birds all turning exactly the same moment. There's something kind of, beyond what's physically possible happening in all of these moments. All the miracles of the world, that our own digestion is a miracle happening. Everything that's happening within our bodies and around us is all guided by some kind of intelligence. And so that's the Vijnanamaya kosha. So that's another larger and also deeper, more subtle level. And then beyond that is Anandamaya, which is Ananda is translated as bliss, but bliss is kind of a misleading word. It's just sort of I would say the word love would be even better, but it's even more confusing. You just kind of have to kind of get the idea that it's something beyond even everything else that connects everything. And that in this system, this particular one, which is, I can't remember, this isn't Taittiriya, but they talk about, then beyond that is Sat Chit Ananda, which is what's called Brahma Brahman in Hindu philosophy, particularly Advaita Vedanta. And that is what we'd call the divine or God. And in non-dualism, this is reality. All the rest of this stuff in Advaita Vedanta, all the rest of this stuff is an illusion. And so that pink dot in the middle is reality as such. I'm sure plenty of people have arguments with that, but that's the way this philosophy is presented. So then seeing it in a different way, if we see it as seeing it going from the inside out, see that little tiny dot in the bottom there? That's the Annamaya. So that's us. That's our food bodies, and that's the food world. That's the world of substance. And then beyond that is pranamaya. You see a relatively larger circle. And then manomaya is the field of thought and feeling and so forth. And then beyond that, vijnanamaya, we have to imagine that vijnana is this intelligence that flows around everything, all creation, flowing beyond that. And then beyond that, ananda, which is, there's not a limit to it. You can't say there's a circle for that because it permeates everything. And so one more conception of it here. This is kind of going back, what's it called?
Matrushki.
Matrushki. These are matrushki. Everybody knows what those are, right? Little dolls in Russian. So in this one here, the largest doll is Anamaya. So that's the food body. And then inside of that, we're getting more subtle and more concentrated is pranamaya. And then inside of that is manomaya, and then jnanamaya, and then anandamaya at the center. So just different ways of seeing this. It doesn't really matter that you get into, this follows that, and you get all analytical about it, but just to understand that there are different levels of energy. And this is very important. This has been very important for me for the reason we'll be getting to in just a second here. Okay, so one more thing on that, and that is that, again, and this is in the Mandukya Upanishad, talking about the three states of consciousness. There's the waking state, here we go, Dane, the dreaming state, and then the deep sleep. And so the waking state is it's what we're doing right now, right? More or less. Hopefully everybody home is in the waking state. That's, we're perceiving the world, we're interacting with the world and so forth. And then there's the dream state. And the dream state is kind of the next one in the line, and that's the one where now you see now instead of out into the world, we're kind of going in towards ourselves in this little graphic here. It's sort of an interesting graphic I just ran across. It has problems, but it's pretty cool. And the idea is that the consciousness is going in now to an inner world. It seems very, when we're in our dreams, it seems very much like the waking world, right? Our dreams seem very much like what's happening in real life, quote unquote, but it's happening in a dream. So it's all happening within our own consciousness. And then the last one is the sleeping state, deep sleep. And that's where, there's like, they say limited bliss, limitless bliss and so forth. Formless consciousness, I think that's a better way. And then beyond that, there's a fourth state. And the fourth state's not here because it's not really one of these states, but it permeates everything. Turiya. It's happening right now, whether we know it or not, the Turiya state. And for the enlightened person, all of these states can see they're very transitional, and they're just abiding in that state, in a state of bliss, complete bliss, anandamaya kosha and beyond that. So anyway, just to give you a little bit of, just to give you another flavor of things. So here's a quote from the Voiceless Silence. Silence thy thoughts and fix thy attention on thy master, whom thou dost not see, whom yet thou dost not see, but whom thou feelest. Oops. I'm going to skip Purnimida for now because we're running out of time. You have another one. I'm going to skip that. I'm going to skip that from Lucifer. Skip that. Oh, even that. Yep. We're skipping all of them because we're running out of time. And I want to have a chance for us to converse a little bit. So, so this is a personal story for me. So first of all, we're going to go to something from one of the koans, one of the very famous koans of Chan, ancient Chinese Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, Chan Buddhism. So when Joshu, who is a Tang Dynasty Zen master, was asked, he had made some reference to an enlightened mind being like the mind of a child. And so he was asked this question: what is the mind of a child? And Joshu said, like a ball in a mountain stream. And the question was, why? Why is it that? And he says, thought follows thought instantaneously without interruption. Okay, so, right? Everybody gets that, right? You do? You're all enlightened. Anyway, this is what's called a mondo, or it's a Zen koan where it's to stimulate your mind. So what was interesting about this koan is I have a book of these koans at home, and I was reading it, and I had come across this particular one. Well, it had made me reflect on the fact that I've been thinking about what is the idea of a leaf on the stream. You know when a leaf's on a stream? So from the point of view of the leaf on the stream, the banks are going by, and the leaf is on the water, on the surface of the water, and it's the same water that's going by. And so if the world, its immediate world is the same, right? But the banks are going by on either side. So it's kind of moving in this flow like that. Now, if you're sitting on the bank of the river and you're looking at the leaf is going to come here, and it's going to come into your field of vision, and it's going to float by like that, and then it's going to go out of your field of vision. So it comes in and goes out. It's the same leaf in both cases, right? So different perspectives. Why is this important? It's kind of one of those things you're either going to get it or you're not, and it's pretty hard to explain. But the thing why it was amazing to me is because I had been thinking about this in relationship to an experience that had just happened to me. And that is that I had been at the birth of my now 3-year-old granddaughter, Violet. And it was a very difficult birth. There involved surgery, emergency surgery. Elena had tried to have her naturally. The midwife had said, no problem. Well, there was a big problem. There wasn't enough space for Violet to go through. And so fortunately, the emergency, it was a small Navy hospital in Bremerton, so she was able to rush her really quickly. And then they had called in a surgeon and had a C-section, which was very difficult because by this time, Violet had decided to go way up into the womb. And so very difficult to get her. It was very traumatic, obviously, for Violet, let alone Elena and her dad and her husband. So Violet is born, no problem, and taken back into the room where Elena is, while Elena is down getting cleaned up from the surgery, getting stitches and all that stuff. And so Violet's in there. And so they clean up Violet. And so Elena's mom and I, my ex-wife and I, are in the room. And so they clean up Violet, and she's squalling a little bit, but not too bad. And then they say, well, so does anybody want to hold her? So I say, yeah. So, Len was very nice. My ex was very nice because she clearly wanted to also, but I got to be the first person in the family to hold her. And so I looked at her, I was just looking down at her, and her eyes were closed, and she's kind of like that, newborns. They've been in this, dark enclosed world. And so there was, I looked at her, and then she opened her eyes and said, oh my goodness, wow. I mean, why would she open her eyes? It's like, she's, you see baby kittens or baby dogs, baby puppies, they always have their eyes closed for a long time. So I was really surprised to see her eyes open. And then beyond that, I could definitely detect a smile, that she was actually smiling at me. And you guys are going to say, oh, what a bunch of baloney. No. There she is smiling at me.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
So my face is in the picture, but I thought that they've decided not to have it there. So it's good. Anyway, so now there she is. There's some other pictures of her since that time. But the point is that the mind of the child being like a ball on a mountain stream, or like a leaf going down the stream, is the leaf on the stream flowing along, or is the leaf something that passes into our view, into our consciousness, and then out again? So just going back and forth from these perspectives and seeing what happened as a result of that, beholding this child literally 15 minutes away from a very traumatic birth, you know, looking up at me and smiling, is, well, I mean, I can't tell you what the effect was. I mean, I know everybody's really cynical and like they know everything and they're all, but I'll tell you, when you see that, if it doesn't blow your circuits, you're not human. And for me, it definitely did, to the extent that pretty much all discursive thought stopped and just the world started being really real all the time. And it's had it had some very drastic impacts. And I won't say that this is like enlightenment or anything like that. I don't even know what that is. And I don't know if it's even possible, but it's definitely profoundly life-changing. And so just to put this into this whole thing about thought or no thought or non-discursive thought. By discursive thought, I mean that what we talked when we were back there in the beginning, and Alan Watts was talking about thought after thought after thought after thought. So when that goes away, what is available to you without that mind, that monkey mind running around, you know, the hamster running around in the squirrel cage, you know, hamster cage. So anyway, a few things that I would say for me, for one thing, when I go to sleep at night, I used to have a real problem with going to sleep. I would think about things during the day and all of that. Well, since then, I don't have that problem. I put my head on the pillow and I go to sleep. It is no discursive thoughts. There's nothing to think about. The body wants to sleep. The mind is not fighting the body. It's allowing it to sleep. So I just go to sleep. With diet, I eat the things that are good for my body and not the things that are not good for my body. This is something that I tell a lot of people that, and they kind of look at me with a blank look like, well, so, which is fine. But diabetes, cancer, obesity, on and on. There's a lot of problems with not eating the right foods. So, I since then lost a bunch of weight and all this is because I didn't, like I can go into a bakery, for example. I can enjoy the baked foods. I can enjoy the smell. I can look at them, look how beautiful they look with the glaze and the nuts on top and all that stuff. I can see somebody eating them and they're eating them and they're, that's so good. I don't need to have that lump of goo in my mouth. It's because it's not really serving my body. And that's, I realize it's a little bit revolutionary for some people, but I don't eat pasta, I don't eat bread, I don't eat things like that, which really don't add much to, I mean, they taste good. They're probably, like cultural things, or they're like comfort food, that sort of thing. Those things are out just because the body gets what it needs and not stuff that it doesn't need just because I have a mental attachment to it. So physical and emotional pain, for example, physical pain is a good example right now. I've got this wrist thing here, but it's just, the pain is something you think about. I have disc problems, that's kind of a non-issue for me, even though, the surgeon, every year I go in and says, you got to have the surgery. And I say every year, well, I don't really want to. And he says, well, and he looks at my MRI and he goes, doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense if you're talking about somebody who's, thinking about the pain in their body all the time. If you're not thinking about the pain in your body, it's just pain. It doesn't have to have any. And the same thing with emotional pain. I had a really unpleasant encounter with my brother-in-law, and I was going to show you the picture, but I won't get into that family drama. But anyway, he got really mad at me and sent me this really scathing email and said, "You're dead to me." I regarded that for about 30 seconds and thought, well, there's nothing I can do about that. That's his perspective of me. And that was the end of it. And that's been the end of it ever since then, even though it was a major family rift. Because what can I can't change. If I'm dead to somebody, that means there's not a way he said, don't get in touch with me, don't do anything, blah, blah, blah. So, okay. I don't need to dwell on that. I don't think, oh my God, this is so terrible, so traumatic. Oh my God, I can't believe this. How this happened? This, go through all that. It's not necessary. Likewise with memories, painful memories, pleasant memories, whatever, they're all memories. They're not happening now. They're not happening in this moment. This moment is awake and alive and full of all kinds of potential. So those memories have happened. They're wonderful, or they're sad, or they're tragic, or they're traumatic, or whatever they are. They're all the things that have shaped our lives up to this point. They don't need to be run through again. The story doesn't need to be regurgitated and gone through again. This is also true for any kind of habitual patterning. You can look at patterns and not just be, glued to those patterns. Social behavior, we were just talking about this morning. We were talking about loneliness and being alone, and saying that, there's a big thing about, people wanting to be alone. They want to have alone time. To me, the concept of being alone or not being alone doesn't really have much meaning. If I'm with somebody or I'm not with somebody, it's kind of the same experience for me. So, and I'm not exactly sure. I haven't really explored that too much. I just thought of it today because I realized that when we were talking about it, because people were really, I've got to be alone. I've got to have solitude. I've got this. I said, I don't really have to have solitude, or I don't really have to be with people. I don't have a sense one way or the other of that. There's not a drive one way or the other. It's just whatever's happening now. Maybe it's with people, maybe it's not with people. Either way is fine. I don't have a preference one way or the other. So one final quote, you can probably tell I'm speeding a little bit here. All directions are within the mind. I am not asking you to look in any particular direction. Just look away from all that happens in your mind and bring it to the feeling I am. The I am is not a direction. It is the negation of all directions. Ultimately, even the I am will have to go, for you need not keep asserting what is obvious. Bringing the mind to the feeling I am merely helps turning the mind away from everything else. And then one final quote. To learn the scriptures is easy, to live them hard. The search for the real is no simple matter. Deep in my looking, the last words vanished, joyous and silent. You can read the rest of it.